Welcome to another episode of Outlaw Nation. I'm your host, Stephen Foster, and this is the Shady Sports Network.
This week's sponsor is Yellowstone Fitness. It's simple. Yellowstone Fitness is the best fitness value you'll find in Billings, Montana. With over 42,000 square feet of fitness, we are continuously adding the latest high-tech equipment, an incredible variety of group classes, and well-trained, experienced personal trainers with totally affordable membership options. Bringing you unmatched value is our mission. Call us today at 406-245-0960 to ask about our special rates and promotions today. Again, that's 406-245-0960 to call Yellowstone Fitness, our sponsor for your Gillette Mustangs and this week's episode of The Stampede. Once again, thank you to Yellowstone Fitness for everything they do to support indoor football in Gillette, Wyoming.
Joining us tonight, the founder of Shady Sports Network, Sam Just. Sam, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Steve. I'm excited to talk some Outlaws football. Came prepared with the Outlaws jersey and everything.
I love it. Sam, where are you from originally?
I was born and raised in Denver, Colorado, or close enough to it. Unfortunately, we do not have an indoor football team, so I get to live vicariously through Billings a little bit.
There you go. I love it. So you're going to help us talk about the game that we just witnessed last Saturday night against the Southwest Kansas Storm. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. And then maybe we can even talk about the next week's Topeka matchup as well.
Oh, I like that. Okay. Well, where would you like to get started tonight, Sam?
Well, we might as well start right here with the score breakdown. As you can see, the game started off really dominant by the Outlaws. By the second quarter, they had a 34-point lead. It looked like it was going to be a blowout. But ultimately, the Storm kind of got back in it in the third quarter. They started scoring some points. We saw them actually outscore the Outlaws in the next two quarters, but they still came up short of a victory at the end of the game, 62-33. The Outlaws had a great game. In particular, we wanted to discuss Jamario Benson.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and dive right into him. What did you think about his performance?
The best game I've seen him play at the quarterback position. I've had the privilege of seeing him play part of the season last year into the playoffs. I feel like this was the best game I've seen him play at quarterback. He was definitely dialed in. He looked fantastic.
Absolutely. I would completely agree. Just a great performance all the way around. As you can see below us, 11 of 15 for 129 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, 73.3% completion rate. I mean, the benchmark for most quarterbacks, in my particular opinion, is like 65%, and he's well over that in this game, and he's also very mobile. So congratulations to Rio Benson. Great performance, and he may have even earned himself another start. I guess we'll see come next week.
Yes, I think that's kind of definitely what I don't know if I'm hearing that around the water cooler or not, but it's going to be hard to insert newly acquired quarterback Lorenz Stefan into the lineup, even though you know he wants to get in there against his former squad in the Topeka Tropics. So we'll just wait and see how that shakes out. I don't know if he's had enough practice time yet with the team, but I guess we'll figure out come Saturday night.
Absolutely. That's the big question. Who's going to start at quarterback for Billings, which might be a little bit of a competitive advantage if they're preparing for Rio, who's very, very mobile, maybe not necessarily the passer that Lorenz is. And then you have Lorenz on the opposite side, which is exactly the opposite of Rio, basically, still very mobile as well. I also wanted to ask you in particular, we've talked about it off camera, but unfortunately, Billings lost one of their defensive leaders, Dylan Donahue. What do you make of that loss, and how are they going to fill his shoes?
I don't think you can fill the shoes of a Dylan Donahue. He was on pace to be one of the defensive leaders in the sack department. He had 4.5 sacks in a very few short games that he played. And then therefore the last couple of games that he played in, I believe he was playing kind of injured. And And finally, that injury just kind of took its toll, and it's taking him out for the rest of the season, which is a shame. We've got some new guys on the roster that I haven't had a chance to meet or really look into yet. But I know there's some new faces in the practice facility. And then there's some other guys on the team that just need to, step up and fill into that role.
Absolutely. I mean, we always hear next man up preached in football. So this is one of those situations. You lose a guy who came in mid-season, was supposed to be kind of the spark plug for that defense, and he stepped up in a big way. But to say that they don't have a leader or energy on that defense would be a flat out lie. Why don't we go ahead and discuss D2, Denarius Antoine, and his performance this past week? What did you make of D2's performance?
I'm going to give you a hot take right here. He's my early candidate for MVP. Okay. I just think he is. You show me another player in the CIF right now that can dominate both sides of the ball, because I haven't found one. I mean, I might be extremely biased in being a huge Outlaw fan and a huge D2 fan. But the way he can run the ball and the way he can defend the ball is just absolutely fun to watch. And he had an absolutely crazy game against the Storm.
Absolutely. I mean, how can you knock what he just did? 4 carries for 35 yards and 3 touchdowns, 4 tackles, a sack, an interception, and a pass deflection. I mean,
and didn't even get recognized as player of the week by the league, which is crazy to me.
100%. I was blown away by the fact that he did not get an award, and he hasn't gotten an award all season long. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, a couple weeks ago, he had a 12 tackle game, and still nothing, which it's just unreal. This guy flies around. He's always near the ball. He definitely is very deserving of the MVP award, should he be a finalist.
Got my vote.
So one of the other things that in this game that I thought they did very well was Josh Batiste. He kind of burst out a little bit, averaged 6 yards a carry, 8 carries for 47 yards and a touchdown. We've kind of seen him do this in a couple games this year, but it seems like they're giving him more of a focus. Why do you think they're kind of focusing more on Josh, and do you think it's going to continue in a bigger way as we go forward?
I think he's a huge weapon for the Billings Outlaws. I hope that it continues. I definitely would think that it would, being that it's been so successful. I think that offensive line has really picked up the pace, really picked up, signing Richard Ramirez back to the squad, and Nike over there on that one side is just really created a really good offensive line. They're really working well together. I think they're only getting better week to week. And I think Josh Batiste is going to reap the rewards of that.
I would 100% agree. This offensive line seems to get better by the week. This week in particular, they didn't give up any sacks, which is always a good thing. I mean, granted, Rio's very mobile, so that definitely doesn't hurt their case. But, I mean, you have to see what they've done in the run game and then the protection they've provided for the quarterback, and have to give them their credit as well. You've talked several times on this show about the fact that there should be offensive line awards, and if there were, I have a feeling a few of them would have come this way to the Billings Outlaws.
Yeah.
One other player that was recently signed, who's kind of showing out for you guys, or us, I guess we could say, is Josh Best. 6 receptions, 34 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And quite honestly, I want to say that he was targeted a couple other times and maybe had catches that were called back. Don't quote me on that, but I feel like he caught a lot more than 6 passes when I was watching through the game.
I can't verify the stats, but I can tell you that he has created an instant spark from the second he stepped on the field back in Billings. He's another player that's absolutely fun to watch. I got a great little TikTok of him scoring a touchdown in the end zone during the last game. So he's a pleasure to watch, and he puts on a show when it comes to game time.
Absolutely. Very excited for him joining Billings once again. And actually, he'll be joining us here on the show in a couple weeks as well. So look forward to that.
Yep.
So recently, Billings brought back Tyron Laughinghouse. First of all, before we get into what's happened, what were your thoughts about that move?
Oh, man, was I excited. I mean, again, I got to see him play in Billings last year. He was just a highlight reel all to himself. And when they announced that he was coming back to help us finish out this season, I was extremely happy. It's disappointing that he's no longer with the team. I understand that it's some personal reasons that have led him back towards home. So our thoughts and prayers are definitely with him and his family in making that decision. And yeah, definitely sad about that. Was happy, and now I'm definitely sad.
Absolutely. So as we will get into, he has decided to leave the Billings Outlaws due to some personal issues that you just alluded to, and he has moved on to the Duke City Gladiators, which is a lot closer to where he normally lives and calls home.
Yep.
So that's part of the motivation there. So it's not one of those situations where Duke City necessarily stole a player or anything like that. It was best for him and his family. So we wish Tyron the best of luck in his future. We wish him great success with Duke City, and we're very happy that Billings doesn't have to play Duke City anymore.
Right, and we're that one-handed diving catch that he made in the end zone is got to be top play worthy of the year for sure.
100%. That was the one thing that I did want to point out. While the Billings Outlaws only targeted 4 receivers and only 3 had receptions, all 3 of those guys who caught a pass caught a touchdown pass. So there is something to say about that, although I would like to see a little bit more than 3 receivers involved in the game, or 4 receivers. And technically, Josh Batiste, that was another thing I wanted to bring up as well. He didn't see any targets. What do you make of that? Do you think that maybe he needs to be involved a little bit more in the passing game?
I think anytime we can get Josh Batiste involved in any of the offense is a good thing. I think maybe with Lorenz taking over or we assume that he's taking over at QB at some point. That'll put Rio, or that'll put Rio back at wide receiver, and I think that'll really create a great second, third option for Lorenz at quarterback. So I think we'll be able to start spreading it around a little bit more once we get Lorenz under center.
That will definitely be an interesting progression to watch on this offense. I personally am excited about the possibilities of Rio and Lorenz on the field at the same time. We talked about it off camera. You could get extremely creative with those 2 men in the backfield at the same time. So, yeah, definitely, Coach King, if you're listening, I'm curious what you're dreaming of, because it's got to be fun to watch. So I'll definitely be watching the next few Billings games very closely to see exactly how those 2 guys are utilized. But moving on, one of the things that I wanted to talk about on defense that was not necessarily a good point of emphasis for us is the fact that they seem to be fairly vulnerable to the quarterback run. Do you have any thoughts as to why that is?
I don't. I really don't, but we kind of struggle against that little quarterback sneak or that quarterback run to the outside. Hopefully we can get that addressed here soon. It's one of the few weaknesses we have on defense that I see, in my opinion. But that's definitely a problem. Those quarterbacks are fast.
100%. I will say that Josh Hollins is probably the most athletic quarterback in the league. He's listed as a quarterback wide receiver for a reason. But he definitely did quite a bit of damage to this defense, which I was kind of surprised to see, because when you look at the rest of the running backs or people who carried the ball, there were some wide receivers in that mix as well. They got stuffed. I mean, Billy Regan's one of the better running backs in the league, 14 yards on 5 carries.
Yeah.
So
when I was doing the preview show with the Storm, that was one of the things I touched on was we really need to stop that running game, because I feel like their running game was probably their strongest offensive component to their game. So I thought it was going to be very important to stop the run. And like you said, we did a great job of stopping the running backs and the wide receivers. We could not stop the quarterback when he took off.
Absolutely. It'll be interesting to see how they address that going forward, because I know they have some matchups coming up soon that are going to face some rather athletic quarterbacks. In fact, this next matchup could be featuring Devon Blair, who also plays wide receiver, very similar to Josh Hollins. So that could be another guy to watch. Maybe we see D2 drop down as a linebacker again, do a little bit of a shadow there. Be very interesting to watch, especially with the loss of Dylan Donahue. Maybe we see more Vic Martinelli down as a defensive end again. A lot of things they can do on this defense. Tay Brooks is definitely a mastermind, so I'm looking to watch and see what he can do as well. But speaking about that defense, despite the fact that they lost Dylan Donahue, you wouldn't have guessed it, because Jeff Luke stepped up and led the team with 2 sacks, and they collected 5 as a team. They also had 7 negative yardage plays produced as a unit. So were you surprised to see this performance by the line, despite the fact that Donahue was gone?
I wouldn't say I was surprised. I was very happy to see it. I was very excited to see it. But like you said, Jeff Luke played a monster game. Victor Martinelli played a monster game. D2 played a monster game. I mean, they didn't really have, that deep pass or that big giant play, other than on kickoffs. I mean, kickoffs was another Achilles heel for us. Anytime we kicked the ball. Matter of fact, I think their kickoff returner was named Player of the Week by the CIF. It kind of just it cracks me up. But so yeah, we definitely need to get better on containing the quarterback run and getting better on defensive coverage. But defensively, man, those guys have been stepping up huge over the last couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Also, shout out to Rashad Powell, who had the 5th sack that we hadn't named.
Yes, I'm sorry. He's the guy that I've been trying to think of his name. Of course, Rashad Powell. He's been definitely one of the guys to step up on that defensive line in Donahue's absence.
Absolutely. He's played pretty well so far, and I look for him to continue to get better as he has more and more playing time going on. As far as the Storm go, they had one wide receiver who's extremely interesting to me. He's a guy who's actually come in and played quarterback at one point for the Storm. Torrance Carr. He had a little bit of a game against Billings when no other wide receiver offensive weapon really had anything going except for Hollins in the run game. He collected 7 receptions, 79 yards, and a touchdown. What do you think was the difference with him versus everybody else? I mean, was Billings just shading coverage the other way, or what was it that he was able to get open so much?
He was very fast, and he runs really good routes from what I saw. He caught that touchdown pass, his one touchdown pass he caught right in front of me, right off to my side, and it was an absolute, just a beautiful catch on the wall. I thought he was going to be hurt at first because he made hard contact with that wall, but he bounced right off into a celebratory dance right in front of me. But yeah, he was definitely their one shining bright star for the Storm. He was just like, all I could say is he just ran great routes. He was very fast, very shifty, and he was definitely where he needed to be on that touchdown pass for sure.
Absolutely. So we were going to talk a little bit about the kickoff coverage woes. So you talked about it a little bit just a moment ago. Kevin Simmons, one of the leading kick returners in the league. This is actually his 2nd Special Teams Player of the Week award for his 2nd team, actually, by the way. He had 4 returns for 124 yards and a touchdown. And honestly, he had another 30-yard return that was called back on a penalty. I believe it was a block in the back or a clipping penalty. They also had Regans back there for 3 attempts. He had 82 yards. And then Adigwu had 1 return for 14 yards as well, which a little bit less of an average there. But the fact that Kevin Simmons was averaging over 27.5 yards per return, I mean, this cannot be sustainable for the special teams unit. if they want to continue to win games. You're giving up over half the field every play. I mean, man, I don't even know how to go about asking this, but I'm like, what are some suggestions you have to fixing that or trying to correct that going forward? I mean, do you maybe squib kick it every time, or I mean, there's got to be ways around this.
Yeah, and the kickoffs were, in my opinion, the kickoffs were beautiful. I mean, the way he sliced that ball right past the scoreboard every time, and deep, beautiful kicks. You think they were like the perfect kicks, but I don't know if he was just out kicking our coverage or what. But I don't really have an opinion on how we're going to fix it or stop it or what to do better. We got some big boys out there. I mean, we got D2 out there. We got Martinelli out there. I mean, we got some heavy hitters out there on our kickoff coverage. So I'm just not sure why. I'm hoping that this gets fixed. Like you said, it's not sustainable moving forward. I feel like I could have been back there returning kicks for the Storm, and I would have put up some numbers. There was just wide open holes in that coverage. So I hate to dig into my team like this, but that's definitely something we're going to need to get fixed moving forward.
Absolutely. One thing I always want to point out, and I'm glad that you brought it up, is the fact that as a fan, you should always be a little critical of your team. You should always recognize that there are weaknesses to every team. I mean, if you follow me on social media, you'll see me bash my Eagles quite a lot when they have bad games. So it's just something that's always been ingrained in me, that you always want to point out the bad things as well as the good. Even though you may not be a coach or anything, you never want a team to be too hyped up over a victory or too down over a loss necessarily, in my opinion. So
hopefully they'll watch this episode on the bus ride, and they'll be very physical on the kickoffs, just on the account of us.
Well, we'll see what they can do, or we can do in that. Maybe we'll send it to them all before the game Saturday morning or something.
Right.
But one other point of emphasis in terms of the negative side, which has kind of carried over despite the change in kickers, they brought in Alberto Castaneda. Hopefully I pronounced that last name correctly. He ended up missing 3 of 5 extra points, including one that was blocked. The blocking was not great. Outside of that and possibly rushing his motion, I'm not really sure what the issue is there, but it just seems like no matter who the Outlaws bring in, they can't necessarily get consistency in the kicking game. Although you did mention the kickoffs are beautiful. They were the entire game. So is this a situation where you think the Billings just kind of rides it out with Alberto because he is improving and then he's also got the beautiful kickoff game? Or is it a situation where we see another change before the end of the season?
You know, I hope not. I hope they let this guy ride. I think he's going to improve from game to game. It would be a shame if we let this one go as well. I think all the kickers that we've had up to this point, especially with Braden, he had also beautiful kickoffs. It's just the consistency on extra points and field goals that we've seemed to struggle with these kickers. So I definitely see him improving, our new kicker, moving forward, and I definitely like to see him get the chance.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, at this point, I think you kind of just ride it out. The season's almost over. You're in the playoff hunt. So hopefully you can develop some consistency going forward. Other than that, I mean, I think you're just getting too late in the year to make a change again at the kicker position. I'm not even really privy to who would be available at this point. I mean,
and I'm watching games like the the Gillette Mustangs versus the Bandits. If they don't have that kicking game that they had in that game, maybe they lose that game, or maybe it's definitely a lot closer. So having a qualified kicker, in my opinion, is very key, is very important.
100%. And we've seen it across the league this year so far. So moving on to next week's game, or I guess this upcoming weekend's game, Topeka is the opponent on the schedule, which I thought was very interesting, that Lorenz Stefan, who was just signed, former passing yard leader of the league. I think he's still pretty high up in the rankings, although his stats are not on the website currently. He is now in Billings. As we all know, he was signed 2 weeks ago, had to serve a 2-game suspension due to his refuse to report designation by Topeka, and just so happened to be available against Topeka. So, I mean, I thought that was an interesting storyline, and maybe one of the reasons why you'd have a motivation to play Lorenz this week. But at the same time, Topeka went out and brought in somebody from Billings. So our good old buddy Kerry Laughlin, who again, none of us are fans of how he was let go, but he's now in Topeka as the defensive line coach, and he gets to host Billings this week. So safe to say this game's going to have a lot of storylines going on behind the scenes. Do you think this game gets chippy at all?
I don't think he gets chippy. That was never really Coach Laughlin's thing. So I don't think his players would get chippy on his behalf. But it does make for definitely an interesting storyline with him returning as defensive coordinator to play against us, our coach against us. It'll definitely make for interesting television.
No doubt. So, I mean, definitely tune into that game this upcoming weekend. Outlaws visit Topeka. So Topeka does have the home field advantage there. We've seen that they've got pretty solid fan support all season long. So it's going to be interesting to see this game all the way around.
Yeah. I got to visit with Lorenz Stefan, right? I got to visit with him. So he was, I asked him, I said, are you playing? Are you starting? He didn't really want to give me too much information. But he said he hoped he got to play. I asked him, are you really wanting to, stick it to your former squad? I mean, just rip the Band-Aid off. Tell me how it is. He said he's here to win, help lead this team to a championship. And if he gets to stick it to Topeka along the way, then so be it. So I love the way that he carries himself. He came up and introduced himself to me when I got to meet him. And I like the way he carries himself, the way he presents himself. He's very professional.
100%. He is arguably one of the most professional players I've ever dealt with through my history of doing this for a little over a year now. But on the flip side, not only does Billings have some quarterback questions, but Topeka has some quarterback questions as well. In their last game, they actually lost 2 quarterbacks to injury, and Max Novak, their starting wide receiver, their wide receiver 1 became their quarterback 1, and came in the game and had to play quarterback, and he dislocated his shoulder. So due to all of that, they had to bring in another quarterback this week, Devon Blair, who a former IFL quarterback. He played for Vegas under new offensive coordinator Pat Pimmel, who was also in Vegas. So it's going to be kind of an interesting situation to see who they play at quarterback as well. They've got Dylan Van Boxel returning from injury. He's the incumbent. He was Lorenz Stefan's backup. And then you've got Devon Blair, the highly athletic guy. We saw some evidence that maybe Billings' defense is a little vulnerable to the quarterback run, so maybe they go that direction, although he was literally signed 2 days ago. So this quarterback matchup is going to be very interesting to watch on both sides of the field. Like we said before, the storylines throughout this game, no matter where you look, are so interesting. It's going to be very, very fun to watch. Do you have any thoughts on who or how Billings should approach their quarterback situation?
Well, if you're going to ride with, if Lorenz Stefan is going to be the starting quarterback for the remainder of the season moving forward, then I would like to see him play against Topeka. I would rather have him, my personal opinion is I would rather have him get his feet wet against a team like Topeka. No offense to Topeka, but I'd rather have him go out and knock the rust off against a team like Topeka versus our next opponent the following week would be the Gillette Mustangs. And the last time we met the Gillette Mustangs, they put 73 points on us. So I feel like they're not going to put 73 points on us again, but I feel like we're going to need to score a bunch of points to be competitive in that game. So I really like to see him get his feet wet against Topeka, knock the rust off, and then have a great full week of practice heading into that home game against Gillette.
I like that approach. We also have talked to Rio here on the channel, and we all know now that he actually likes to play wide receiver more than he likes to play quarterback. So, I mean, not many reasons why you don't make the move other than the fact that he just played the game of his life. So,
yep.
Topeka's got an interesting quandary on their hands. They have to prepare for two totally different quarterbacks, and ironically, so does Billings. So it's going to be very interesting once again to see that quarterback matchup. The turnover in Topeka, that was one thing I wanted to discuss. This Topeka team that's been winless throughout this season is no longer the same team that it was. They have literally brought in 8 new players, including a new quarterback, 2 new wide receivers, 2 running backs, as well as several players that play both ways, and an offensive lineman as well, a defensive lineman as well. So basically, no matter where you look, they've brought in new players to kind of try and supplement this team. They also brought in what in my mind is kind of an all-star staff. You got Richard Smith as the head coach. You got Pat Pimmel as your offensive coordinator, and then you've got Kerry Laughlin as the defensive line coach. 3 former head coaches on the same staff. We kind of see this stuff in the NFL at times, and it works out pretty well typically. So this might be a very good game. I mean, are you at all worried about the fact that we haven't really seen this Topeka on film at all?
Yes, very worried. Because, it's in this league, it's just like any other league. Any team can beat any other team on any given Saturday or Friday or whatever day that they're playing. So when you don't have a lot of tape or film to go off of, you're really just kind of just rolling the dice. It's a guess on what you're going to be looking at, who's going to be playing quarterback, like you said. So there's just it's a lot of unknown. So definitely makes for a little unnerving game, because this could be one of those trap games where hopefully you don't get caught, overlooking this team, because it could come back to bite you.
100%. I would also point out the interesting timing of the coaching staff change. I'm not saying there was anything there that was necessarily nefarious, but it's funny that the coaching staff that Lorenz knew and maybe had some sort of advantage over is no longer there to face him. So, interesting that was made before the Billings game and the potential start of Lorenz Stefan, but not saying there's anything nefarious going on there. It's just the timing of everything that's going on in this game is just lining up to be one of those marquee matchups, those games that are just classic football games.
Yep.
And I also wanted to point out that Topeka last week gave Sioux City the business, and Sioux City is one of the better teams in the league. So, I mean, I think they've got a lot of talent in Topeka, and I think if Billings sleeps on them in this game, it could potentially end up an upset very quickly. But I do like everything you said. I think this could turn into a tune-up game for Billings, assuming that they continue to play the way they have over the past couple of weeks. But any final thoughts before we get out of here?
I just hope that we continue to put it together. We had a great game against the Southwest Kansas Storm. We need to continue that against the Topeka Tropics, and then carry that momentum into that game against Gillette. I like the way we're heading into this playoff run. I definitely feel like we're going to be one of the playoff teams. We'll just need to see where we're going to be. I feel like we're going to end up probably being the 5th seed. And that will probably get us a road playoff game against a team like Salina. So
as much as I hate to say it, if you're not the top 2 seeds in the league, there's no easy path to a championship here.
Yep.
So I would say it's in the Outlaws' best bet to get the momentum rolling now and hold on to it for the next few weeks, because you're going to need it come playoff time.
For sure.
But, I think it's going to be interesting way to close out the season. I think there's a lot of teams that are still very much in it. Should Outlaws stack together a couple losses? Should Topeka stack together a couple wins? It could be Topeka in the playoffs. It could be technically still Rapid City, although it would take a lot. So, not necessarily saying that's going to happen, but for all 8 teams to technically be alive with 3-4 games left in the season, it's pretty impressive.
Pretty exciting stuff for sure.
Absolutely. Talk about amazing parity in this league. But again, thank you so much for having me on. I know I kind of took the lead. It's just a habit, I guess. But this was a fun discussion for sure.
Absolutely. Sam, appreciate you being on the show tonight.
Definitely. As always, go Outlaws.
Definitely.